Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from L&G Mortgage Club. In today's session, we'll be touching on the hot topic of ID&V, and it's something that I've become passionate about over the last few years. As we know that there are changes ahead, changes in the way we do things, not just from a work perspective, but our lives as sort of personally and as customers of ours. We're all thinking about how we can improve processes, make sure that data is shared more securely and in more efficient ways. Today, I'm very fortunate to be joined by Stuart Young from MyIdentity.org and Eleanor Currie from DCMS, who are going to share their thoughts, views and insight as to what has actually been happening on this wonderful subject over the last few months, because a lot has progressed. My ask of you today is to listen to what is being said. I'm sure you may have some questions, so you can actually put questions into the chat here, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the conversation or after. But more importantly, please take away the comments and the thoughts and the insight that's being shared today, and please come and get involved in what you hear. My worry is that we'll all happily sit here and think, yeah, it's nice to know. And before we know it, we might have some processes imposed upon us slightly. And now is the time to be ready, to be thinking about it and being involved. So we have time to shape the proposition that is likely to come to market over the coming months. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Eleanor Currie to give her thoughts from the DCMS perspective as to what is happening. Eleanor, welcome.
Thanks very much. I don't know if people can see the slides that I can see on the screen.
They're there.
I'm hoping that you can. So I'm just like they said, I'm just going to do a quick canter through DCMS's plans in this area. So DCMS is the department responsible for enabling a digital identity market to form in the UK. And this is a market that's intended to be used kind of by the private sector and for private sector services. So I'm sure some of you will already be aware of kind of what digital identities are. But I just wanted to go through as well a few of the benefits, some of which have already been mentioned. But obviously there are some really big privacy benefits, security benefits, and it can be a lot quicker and more cost effective than proving your identity using kind of physical documents in the way that you would do it now. I just want to say as well that we are not mandating digital identities and we are not kind of mandating how the digital identity market develops. But what we do want to do is help that market develop by building trust and doing what the government can do to help that market to form. So back in 2020, we issued a response to a call for evidence on digital identity, and we committed to doing three things. The first was to create a clear framework of rules to show what good digital identities look like. These rules will be owned and managed by a governance function, and that will also make sure that the rules are being followed as they should be. And then those two parts will be underpinned by our legislative proposals, which will kind of give power to the governance function to enforce the trust framework. And we are also proposing enabling a permissive gateway to allow government departments to allow the private sector to make checks against data they hold, because we know that that's some really authoritative and secure data sets, which could really help the market and also make it more inclusive. So those are our three main kind of strands of work. But I do want to highlight as well that we kind of, throughout all of this, we have a real focus on privacy, inclusion, and international interoperability, which we think are all really important. So since 2020, we have made quite a bit of progress on those three commitments. We have launched the second iteration of the trust framework, which we did almost a year ago now in August 2021, and we've done some testing of that. We're now looking at developing the beta version of that trust framework, where we'll move into some more sandbox style testing, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a second. On governance, we've set up a shadow interim governance function because we are working with the Home Office and DBS on allowing digital identities to be used for right to work, right to rent and DBS checks. So we have a shadow interim certification process to support that work. And we have also announced the Office of Digital Identities and Attributes, which is a bit of a mouthful. So the shortening version that we're going for is OFDIA, which will be the governance function. In the short term, that will sit within DCMS, but then as the market develops, it will eventually become outside DCMS and be fully independent. And then on our legislation, we published a pre-legislative consultation response in March to kind of confirm our intentions, which is largely what I kind of talked through on the previous slide. So we've got the legal gateway. We've also got a statutory presumption. So we'll be writing it into legislation that digital identity checks are kind of equally as valid as a physical identity check. And then we also have some stuff on mutual recognition and governance in there. And then just to put something on the international side, we have recently signed a UK-Singapore Memorandum of Understanding. So we'll be looking at how we can use that to help with our testing of the trust framework in the international space. So just to give a little bit more detail on the trust framework, this is basically the kind of the rules which will govern digital identity providers. We have released it as an alpha so that we can get a lot of feedback from industry and also from kind of public sector and civil society groups, which has been really helpful in refining the draft that we currently have. So we have completed alpha testing, which was aimed at looking at how well the trust framework is understood. And in the summer, we're looking to publish the beta, and then we'll move towards sandbox style testing, which will look at kind of how effective is the trust framework and is it fit for purpose. So the trust framework has rules for service providers, and it does have some other roles in there as well. Certification against the trust framework, it won't be mandatory, but it will kind of it will come with a trust mark. So certified providers will have that kind of government stamp of approval, and that will help businesses who might be working with you or citizens. That will help them have that reassurance that the rules set by the government are being followed. And then to go on to some governance and legislation updates. So we're bringing forward our legislation, as I mentioned, the trust mark that will be kind of underpinned by that legislative bid so that it will be really clear who is certified and who isn't. It will also create that legal gateway that I've mentioned, and it will confirm the legal validity of digital forms of identification. And I've already mentioned the OFDIA will be set up, but that will be kind of underpinned. The powers that it has will be underpinned by our legislation. And then I quickly want to just talk through our initial use case, which is with the Home Office and DBS. So following the COVID pandemic, Home Office and DBS allowed more kind of virtual means of conducting right to work, right to rent and DBS checks. They've now announced that using digital identity services or identity verification technology will replace those kind of remote checks. So there's kind of a period where you can do both, and then from the 1st of October, it will just be the digital identity version which is allowed. So it's not mandatory for them to do digital checks, but if they would like to, then this is a way that those types of checks can kind of continue to be available. So we have announced already the certification bodies, which have been accredited by UCAS. And excitingly, the certification is already underway for some of the very first providers, and we expect to see certified providers kind of entering the market very soon. So that is quite an exciting early use case. But that's kind of not the end of what we're looking to do. So I just wanted to wrap up by looking towards the future, looking at some of the things that we will be doing in the coming months and years. So obviously, we still have a lot of work to do on establishing the governance function. We've taken some really good steps, but that needs to be kind of developed further. And like I said, it will eventually become independent and sit outside of DCMS. We obviously want our legislation to pass through Parliament because we think that those things in there are really important for helping to establish the market. We're also looking at the creation of some type of intermediary function that will help make the most use of that permissive data checking gateway. So that we still need to do a lot of kind of development there. And then on sandbox style testing, that first use case I mentioned, the right to work, right to rent DBS checks, is a really good early test of the trust framework. But we definitely want to have a very wide-ranging period of testing of the trust framework beta before we kind of go into the live phase. So we want to make sure that that does include some international participants, but also that it includes kind of a range of key sectors and encompasses providers and relying parties so that we can kind of test how the trust framework works across the ecosystem. And then lastly, we'll be doing some public-facing comms to help build trust in the market as it develops, and also to support inclusion by giving some kind of educational messages and helping to explain to people what digital identities actually are and why they might want to use them. So that is my last slide. I'm happy to hand back, and I can take questions if there are any.
Well, I've got a load, I'm afraid. Sorry.
No worries, go for it.
So you talked about the governance of the relative providers, and obviously you're going to put a plan into place. What sort of timeline are you working to on that?
It's a good question. So our initial kind of, there's 3 phases of governance, the first of which is shadow interim governance, then interim governance, and then finally just governance. The shadow interim governance is already set up, and that is managing the certification process for the right to work, right to rent DBS checks. So it's currently is possible to get certified against the current alpha version 2 of the trust framework. And then before we can move to the interim governance, so that second phase, we'll need our legislation to have passed to give it those powers. And then, so we can't commit at the moment to when our legislation will go through, but we have done kind of all of the pre-work. So that's that pre-legislative consultation I spoke about. So once we have our legislation, which we hope won't take too long, but we are restricted by parliamentary timetables, then we'll move into that second phase of governance. And then the third phase, I think, will be slightly longer because we'll want to make sure that we have all the information we need about the emerging market to understand where would be a good final home for that governance body.
Okay, so without getting you to commit completely here, I mean, do you think it's a sort of 12-month process, 18-month process? Where's your best guess? I'm not going to hold you to it, but give us an indication of roughly where you think it may go.
So in terms of the final home, I think that's probably in the years. In terms of that second phase, I would hope it's not going to be in the very many years, that it will be a lot quicker. But yeah, I'm afraid I really can't say too much.
Okay, and that's good. Obviously, if we move into legislation, what real impact does that have? I mean, I assume that sort of forces the hand of lenders to accept and brokers, estate agents, such to adopt the process.
So yeah, I'm not sure I'd use the phrase forces the hand. What I would say is that it removes blockers. So it won't be mandatory to use digital identities, and it's not mandatory to sign up to the trust framework. But what we hope the legislation will do is that for anyone that does want to, it really gives confidence for anyone that's accepting a digital identity that they are they can fully trust the process because there'll be the trust mark there. And we will have that kind of statutory presumption that settles that legal question of when can I accept a digital identity.
Okay, that's great. So somebody watching has very kindly sent in a question. So I know there's some people out there looking at this, which is great. So the question is, to the extent that DCMS has moved forward with the framework, what discussions have been held with the regulators?
That's a great question. So we have very regular engagement sessions with kind of a lot of different sections of the market, and one of those is regulators. So we talk to them roughly once a month on the trust framework, but also on other things, on our governance and legislation proposals as well. And I would imagine that here a relevant body would also be kind of land registry. So they're also very much on our radar, and we do talk to them as well. And that's something that will be included in that beta testing phase. We know that regulators are really important. And so we want to make sure that the beta testing surfaces any issues there may be with regulations, so that everything is kind of fully aligned when we move to that live phase.
Okay, that's great to hear, and obviously really sort of reassuring, that you're sort of dealing with the regulators in our market and making sure they're involved and aware, which is great news. So thank you. And just one last question. Obviously, I know that Stuart will be chomping at the bit to sort of sell his wares and where his project is going. But is MyIdentity the only project, or have you got others involved as well that we're not yet aware of?
So yeah, I mean, there's lots of different organizations that are involved in doing kind of various different projects. Yeah, I guess to give you an idea of the scale, so that regular engagement I mentioned, we talk to kind of around 300 people every month. Obviously, not all of those are doing the same thing that MyIdentity is doing. But yeah, there is a lot going on kind of across the whole of the market.
Okay, fantastic. Well, look, really appreciate your time today. I know you may need to sort of slip off shortly, so if there are any further questions, we'll contact you after and get rid of answers, but I do appreciate your time today. Stuart, I'll bring you in now. So MyIdentity.org is, well, I've been working with you since the start, as it were, and obviously, great that Eleanor has come to support this today and give her views as to where the direction of travel is. But what's happened in your world? What's progressed over the last few months?
Great. Quite a lot has happened, actually, and I think Eleanor has kind of touched upon this in terms of a lot of progress being made within the industry, and there are lots of other schemes being developed at the moment. Within the MyIdentity scheme, it's been very challenging because essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the whole industry here. So from the agency side, we've had a lot of great support from Property Mark, the Property Ombudsman Service, the Property Redress Service, and RICS. They've been working with ourselves together to develop communications and engagement for how the estate agents need to respond to this, especially in light of the economic crime bill that came through following events in the Ukraine, and ownership and the ownership of properties by foreign entities. The legal sector has been working enormously well together. Again, we've been doing a lot of work through the Law Society with the likes of CLC, the Conveyancing Association, etc. Indeed, quite a group of them came together and produced a white paper last month, again, advising the legal sector how to adopt digital identities and that it's okay for them to do it and how to do it. And I think finally then, in relevance for today, the work that we've been doing through financial regulators and representative bodies with the likes of UK Finance, AMI, IMLA, the support there has been great. And we've now working through UK Finance. Back in January, UK Finance agreed to take steps to get all the lenders on board to ensure that they are seen as not blockers to this. So, for example, we're working with UK Finance and the Law Society to provide some interim updates on the lenders' handbooks and enabling conveyancers and indeed brokers to adopt the scheme, because I think Eleanor used some good language there. It's about, or good point of taking the blockers away, rather than forcing the hand, making it easier for people. So we've had some major technical challenges along the way, which has resulted in us changing the hub provider that we're working with. But considering that we are trying to change the whole industry here, I think each cohort with their own regulators and representative bodies are working now together in a coordinated fashion to look at how the industry adopts what the DCMS are pushing down and what we're trying to do for the home buying and selling sector.
So it feels like yourselves and DCMS are pretty well joined up, and I guess you'd both agree with that. I'd like to think you do. Eleanor, obviously you mentioned the FCA Sandbox and what's going on there, or the Sandbox as it is. Stuart, what have you learned from the Sandbox? What does this really mean for you?
Yeah, this is a great achievement. We're really pleased about this, about being able to get into the FCA Sandbox, because what it really means, it enables any FCA regulated firm to work on the trial and work to assess how their business adopts the scheme standards with the protections that the FCA Sandbox environment provides them. So that will hopefully make it a lot easier for them, for brokers and lenders, or as I said, any FCA regulated firm. We've agreed some of the KPIs now with the FCA, and we're doing that with UK Finance input as well. So some of the key KPIs that we're going to be looking at are the reduction in fraud, obviously the numbers of lenders and brokers that come on board, the number of customers and consumers that go through the process, and the transaction volumes. And then we'll look at things like the percentage rates, percentage of success rates of people who actually get through this. And combined with that, we'll also look at the consumer abandonment rates and why they're dropping out. Is it due to the design of the scheme? Is it because they, for whatever reason, they're trying to commit fraud, or the user journey not working for them? Because we have to remember here, not everyone is digitally engaged, so it's how we support them through the process. So I think all in all, it's how, for the financial, any FCA regulated firm now is going to provide them with the protections and give them the opportunity to start, getting involved in this innovation and understanding how they can start to adapt it and bring it into their business with the protection of the FCA regulatory.
Okay, so it's interesting stuff. It's probably moving forward, and I guess it gets that endorsement that you're in the sandbox and you're getting more parties involved.
Yeah.
I know you were sort of looking at a pilot phase to sort of test where you're at the moment. Is that still on course, or what do you need now to actually help take that step forward?
Yeah, the progress has been pretty good. We've had a number of organisations from across the three different sectors: agency, conveyancing, and lending, who have signed up, and and others going through the signing process of the contractual arrangements that go around these things. I think one of the big things for us, though, earlier on was listening to the brokers and conveyancers early on in the project, and what they needed was getting the lenders on board and getting them ready. So over the last 3 months, especially since January, a lot of our focus has been getting the lenders on board to help the brokers and the conveyancers who supplying into the lenders. So I think the big milestone achievement that we've done now is through UK Finance, we're getting the lenders into a position that they can start to accept the identities that are presented to them when a consumer's had it done by an agency or conveyancer or a broker. And this is why, the whole beta is about testing not only what the scheme is doing, but testing how it works for the service, what we call the service providers or relying parties, for the brokers and lenders and everyone that's in it, and as well as the identity providers. And this allowed us to test what we're doing as well in terms of the project. So it's evolved very, very well. We're ready to go now. We're ready to engage with people. And I think just to touch upon what Eleanor talked about there is we're now working with land registry as well. And the project is extending a bit more to include qualified electronic signatures, so that you need identity behind qualified electronic signatures. And if we're looking at a fully digital end-to-end process, there's the opportunity to introduce a QES, so you don't need a witness to sign documentation anymore if they're doing a consumer's doing their mortgage deeds or something like that. So we're working very closely with land registry on that and QES. So everyone's kind of working together to nudge the whole industry forward.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a process to really sort of streamline and improve speed, if you like, across the process, probably reduce cost and just make a number of efficiencies through the journey, which I think is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the IDPs. I know that Eleanor mentioned that there would be the governance and things. And when I look at the ones that you are working with, there's other sort of unfamiliar names that's come up. So could you just explain who you've got on your panel, and are there further discussions to add names that may be more familiar to us?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I would argue that of the 5 that are currently onboarding, Yoti, DigiIdentity, Obid, Nuggets, and Third Fort, 3 of these are very well established in the home buying and selling sector, especially within the conveyancing agency side. And of course, now they're moving more into the financial services side. And we've got 2 other identity providers who are working to onboard onto the scheme. I think it's going back to some, again, what DCMS are doing. I stand to be corrected, but I understand there's about 45 organizations that are going through the DCMS certification. These IDSPs, identity providers, they'll all be working in different sectors. But I think what the DCMS framework, as that evolves, we'll see that different IDSPs will start coming into the market, and through interoperability, they'll start to be able to operate across different sectors. So it actually opens up the markets for them. I think what we have seen over the last 2 years, though, especially because of the growth of importance in identity, which has been driven by a number of factors, we've seen a growth of identity providers coming into the UK marketplace that are before unknown. And this has been largely driven off quite some very hefty VC investments. So from feedback that I've received, organizations are now reviewing, they're looking at the identity providers that they're working with. There's some established firms in there, but there's a lot of newer companies coming into the marketplace. And I think what we have to remember is they're all doing ID&V in different ways, but they're all working to the same outcome set by the standards of what DCMS are doing. So I think it's absolutely key, the message for those lenders and brokers and conveyancers, when they're looking at identity providers, the first thing that they should be looking at is that identity provider working to DCMS certification? Because it's about the standards that they're working to, because they have to evidence that they're doing identity to a standard that is recognized under AML. And very importantly as well, for those that are using these identity providers, those that are working through this scheme, those identity providers now carry liability, and that's never happened before. So liability is shifting back towards the identity providers working as part of this scheme. So there are some new names coming in there. There's some new upstarts coming into the place, and that's simply because of the evolution of technology and the greater use of things like open banking, and what government is doing by opening up. They're working to open up their data to make it more accessible to us within the private sector.
Are you in a position at the moment to actually share the names that are on the list, or is it too early and too confidential?
The identity providers?
Yeah.
Sorry, there's Yoti, there's Third Fort, there's a company called Obid, there's Digi Identity, and Nuggets. They're the 5.
Okay, but what about the other ones that are coming down the track, as it were?
You mean the other 45?
Yes.
Oh, take your pick. My understanding is just about every single identity provider out there in the marketplace is going through the DCMS certification. So take your pick on them. Those 5 are the ones working through our scheme at the moment.
Okay. And if anybody listening today wants to know more about the ones that you're working with, can we put them in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people have to remember is the MyIdentity scheme is totally IDSP agnostic. So if you want to speak to any of them, we can put you in touch with all of them. No problem at all.
Fabulous. So with all the work that you're doing, and obviously you're going into pilot, when do you expect to be in a position to sort of roll this out fully?
Well, we're ready now. That's all I can say. So with all the work that we've been doing, we've joking aside, we are ready now. We're working with organizations, taking them through the contractual issues of what they need to do. So we're already working with DCMS to put in place new ways of doing IDV, enabling the consumers to come through that. So that's all in place. And for the community, for brokers and lenders, you're ready to come on board. We've got the FCA Sandbox set up. We've got the backing with UK Finance. They're working to bring the lenders on board, and the lenders are working within. They've got a cohort of them putting together terms of reference to look at how in the interim that they accept the identities. We've got work going on between UK Finance, BSA, and Law Society to look at interim updates for the Lenders Handbook to enable brokers and lenders to adopt these so that the lenders will accept it, so not in breach of the Lenders Handbook. So we're ready now. It's all there ready now for people to start working on it. And using this time, I know Eleanor was unable to, or government were unable to give us a time scale. my understanding is going to be sometime next year. But to use this period, I think, as you said, Danny, to get people involved now so they can start to look at how they adopt these standards into their processes. They don't have to go full 100%. Use the trial just now, use the protection of the FCA Sandbox environment to look at how they start taking their customers through this journey.
Yeah, I quite agree. I'm personally a fan of getting involved to actually run it alongside current processes, so we can all get confident and comfortable that actually it does what it says on the tin and actually meets the same standards that we use today, if not better. Or if we do find some challenges, we've got time to adjust it and things like that. So if anybody listening today actually wants to get involved and feel that they see the value in it from their business, and certainly I would encourage everybody that's on the call, if they're not already involved, to do so, because as I say, we have the opportunity to shape it for our own gain, if you like, and be part of it. How do we go about that?
Get in touch with us, or get in touch with us through you, Danny. We're working through, at the moment, groups who are bringing together groups of lenders and brokers and conveyancers and such like. We've done a session this morning with a digital mortgage broker. We're doing a lot of training sessions and one-to-one sessions and take people through. So it's a case of just getting in touch with us now. One of the things that we'll do with the FCA then is, if we have to provide a list of the names of brokers or FCA regulated firms, so that they know those firms are taking part in the trial. So the sooner people are getting in touch with us, the sooner we can pass that back to the FCA, and that provides the companies that are taking part with the protection that they need.
Okay, great stuff. Well, look, you've kindly answered all the questions I had today. Was there anything else you wanted to draw out while we've got the time?
Well, I think, there's always that question of why should I do it? What's in it for me to do it? And I think a good way of responding to that is, we've done a lot of work with lenders. I know I keep going on about lenders, but they are quite important at the end of the line. And what I've done is I've kind of summarized the feedback that they've given us as to why they're working towards this. And the top of the list comes from what they said: better customer journeys experience. It makes a lot easier for them. The onboarding of customers a lot faster and more convenient. It removes the need for a lot of face-to-face that still exists. They see the benefit of the customers being in control of their identity and have that ability to share it. They see it reduces their time to have to do customer due diligence and stripping out duplication and repeated activities. They see it as enhanced privacy protection for consumers. And very importantly for us, what UK Finance are doing is, and as Eleanor touched upon, is the reusability of that identity. So UK Finance are looking at the use of MyIdentity, not just for mortgage lending, but for all financial services, which I think is great for the consumer. It's going to make it so much easier. What they've highlighted to us for brokers, actually, they've said they see this as brokers are often having to face a lot of challenges when requesting copies of documentation and dealing with customers face to face. But having the shareable ID strips out, again, a lot of the duplication of effort and supports the sharing of customer data and information as part of that application process, which they see as contributing, more time to, contributing less time in the process. And I think because we're still in that bit of a stage where we're not sure when the legislation's coming in, they're seeing the pilot stage just now as future-proofing. It'll give greater clarity and consistency to the development of digital identities for them, so that there's a standardization across the industry, which reduces risks and increases the barriers to fraud. And trust services. The big thing that they've looked at is this creates greater trust in the information that's being presented to them, because there's a standard behind it and liability. And very importantly, it's aligned to two different government policies. We've had DCMS on today, but we have to remember that this actually meets the requirements of DLUC, Department for Levelling Up Communities and Housing, because they're working to improve the home buying and selling process. And I think lastly, but not leastly, the most important thing is around compliance and regulation. It absolutely meets requirements around AML what government are putting forward meets money laundering regulations, economic crime bill. So it will make things a lot easier from a compliance and regulatory perspective for lenders and the industry. And those last 4 points are really very much taken from what lenders have said to us. So hopefully that gives people a good indication of what's in it for them.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. So I'm going to draw it to a close there, but thank you to everybody for watching. Stuart, some great insight, and I really appreciate you inviting DCMS to come and share their thoughts as well. As I said at the start, the call out here is that there's a lot of good information. We're on a journey. We certainly seem to be getting some traction, and this is going to come our way. And I will say whether we like it or not, but it is coming our way for the greater good of our industry, for ourselves and our customers, and the whole sort of process that we go through. I can't reiterate enough that it is important that we do get involved. We really understand this and see how we go. But, you know, if we can do it now, then before it actually becomes full legislation, and I will say our hand is forced because it will be, in my opinion, then we need to sort of make sure that we've had our say and are really part of this. So if there is a way you can run this alongside your current processes to find out, I do encourage you to get in touch with Stuart to see whether that's possible to do so. And let's learn together and make sure we have the best possible solution for our businesses, for our customers, and for everybody to make us all safe and secure going forward. So it just remains to me to thank Stuart and Eleanor for joining us today. Thank you for watching. If you do have any questions after this, please do drop us a line and we'll be very happy to respond after the event. And if you do want to hear more about this, then please do let me know, and I'm very happily reconvene, because I think this is a topic that will run for a little while yet. So thank you ever so much for watching. See you all soon. Goodbye.